Alright, so this is going to be part 4 to what if Asta had copy magic. With that being said, let's just roll the intro.
They took it to 10. Let me tell you how I come through with the 1-2, kicking shit like kung fu. Treat a bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
Alright, so before we start this what if you haven't seen the other parts, then go watch that. I think something went wrong with YouTube because I think part 3 didn't get as many views as it should have. I don't know if it was because the time that I uploaded it or because I did a double upload, but something happened where it didn't get as many views that I believe it should have. So if you were wondering about this series, just go and watch the 3rd episode or the 3rd part if you haven't caught up yet. So yeah, also I would like to say that I'm almost at 1,000. We are around maybe 100, a little bit more than 100 before we get to 1,000. So I really appreciate if you guys, subscribe. So I'm gonna do something special for 1,000. And yeah, so with that being said, let's just go into the actual what if now. So our story actually would start off in that week before Asta actually goes to the capital to report to the Wizard King. And this is the part where he's kind of in that, not coma, but that kind of resting period where he was asleep for a week. So in this kind of dream state, right, he has no senses, right? So this would help him see the mana flow within his dreams. And if you don't know what the mana flow is, it's basically what it sounds like. It's the flow of magic, and it's easier to see this flow of magic if you have less senses active, and depending on your magical sensing in general. And not only that if you are a wind mage, those particular mages are more sensitive to the mana, sensing in general, that mana flow. So as Asta's in this dreamlike state, he sees the mana flow, and to him it's like similar to what saw, where it was green birds, but instead of green it would be black. And this is basically to imply, the type of the affinity of magic he has, which is copy ink magic. And he would basically grab onto the strings or the mana flow itself. And as he's doing this, by the time he gets to it and reaches it, he actually wakes up and a week has passed. And this is when he actually recovers from what he just did. And 2 birds appear on his shoulders, on each one. And these birds aren't the anti-magic birds, and it's not Nero either. These are actually the spirits. They're twin spirits for the ink magic. And I got this from a comment, and basically they're going to be ravens, and they're going to kind of reference the kind of legend from Norse mythology with Odin and how he has those kind of ravens to kind of be his eyes in a way. So we're gonna call the 2 I think it's called Hun. Hold up, if I remember how to pronounce them, I think the first one's called Hunin and the second's called Moonin. And basically these translate to thoughts, and the other one translates to memory, I believe. So as for their personality, they're going to be somewhat shy. I'm going to say that one's shy and the other one's kind of confident and loud, just like Asta. So one's kind of be like and the other one's going to be kind of like Asta. And they're going to both have that kind of thirst for knowledge, so that's going to be their kind of personality. And they're going to be able to talk to people. I don't think it's going to be in the case like the salamander spirit, where he's kind of just there but not really contributing in conversational wise. So yeah, they're gonna have that ability to talk to others. As Asta kind of gets out of his bed, he would go to the kind of mess hall or the cafeteria of the Black Bull's base, and this is where he would meet up with the rest of the Black Bulls who are eating breakfast. And the Black Bulls would kind of question why Asta has 3 birds on him, the 2 ink spirits and then Nero. And Asta's kind of somewhat familiar with these two birds, since they would have introduced themselves right as they got on his shoulders, right? And he'd be really excited to tell his teammates or his squad mates, and he would basically tell them that these two are called Human and Moonin. If I remember, that's the way you pronounce it. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. But basically, he tells them what they are, and he tells them that they're spirits. And they would kind of introduce themselves. And yeah. So they would see kind of similarities between, or at least Noel would see similarities between these two birds to Asta and Yuno. You guys can tell me which bird you want to be which. I don't think it really matters too much, but I guess if you guys want that to be like which personality. So as they're kind of eating, this is when Yami would tell them that they need to go to the capital to explain to or make a report to the Wizard King, right? And he basically tells Asta, Noel, and Charmy to go, since they don't want Luck to go because he's just gonna pick fights with people there. So yeah, in the last kind of Black Clover What If, the one for Sunshine, when I did part 4, I didn't really explain or to go over the stuff with Charmy, really, because all of her stuff in that arc was kind of her by herself and didn't really affect the story too much. It was kind of just there for like gags. So in this one, I'm also not going to go through it really too much, or at all really. So Finral would open up a portal for them to walk through. They would get to the capital, and this is when Asta, Noel would kind of meet up with the Golden Dawn members, which would be Yuno, Mimosa, and Klaus. And Klaus would basically be like, it's nice to see you up and about, Asta. Are you fully recovered from your injuries? And Asta would be like, yeah, all I needed was a few days of rest and plenty of food. And this is when Asta, or Yuno, would be like, you're such a child. And this was when Asta would kind of like tell Yuno, like, what do you mean by that? And he would kind of get mad, but like they're like kind of joking around. And this is when Asta would approach Mimosa, and Mimosa would kind of run away, and Noel would kind of go up to her and ask her what was her deal, and she would kind of explain that she has like some sort of feelings towards Asta that she doesn't really know how to explain too well. And Noel would start to feel the same way, and both of them would start blushing and kind of freaking out. And the other people that are there, Asta, Yuno, and Klaus, would kind of be questioning this and not know really what's going on. So after that kind of ordeal would happen, this is when they would walk into the kind of courtyard of the palace, and Asta would comment on Klaus not knowing where to go really, and he's like, come on, Four Eyes, don't you know where to go? And Klaus would basically say like, well, us Four Eyes don't know everything, we only go to the palace only a few times throughout our career. And this is when a door opens and the Wizard King pops through, and this is when everyone kind of bows down, just how they do in the anime. So they would basically have that greetings, and they would go to that kind of tower where they do in the anime to check out the new magic that they have. So the Wizard King would look at Yuno's grimoire and see that he has the wind spirit, Sylph, I believe her name is, and he'd be like, wow, thinking in his head, one of the 4 great elements. So this is who she chose for this generation. And he would hand back his grimoire and say, that's some pretty impressive magic, can you show me? And Yuno would be like, no, I can't really show you because I don't really know how to use it. And the Wizard King would kind of be bummed out. And this is when Asta would kind of show him his grimoire, and he'd be like, wow, copy magic, that's pretty rare. And he would look through more into his grimoire and say that, wow, it's also like ink magic. and he would see a spell, and this would be the kind of spirits. He's like, can you do this? Because I think in Black Clover, they don't say that, spirits can only be of the 4 main elements. They don't say that, right? I checked through the wiki, and I even rewatched the anime, and they don't say anything about that. They don't say that it's only the 4 elements. So we're going to assume that anything that isn't the 4 elements is rare. So the Wizard King would be very excited to see this. So Asta would do the spell, and this is when the 2 ravens would come out. Yeah, so it would be Hunin and Moonin, and he would show them off to the Wizard King, and the Wizard King would be so surprised to see these 2 birds because it's a twin spirit. So what would happen next is that the Wizard King would give Asta an opportunity to copy one of his magics because he wants to see how it looks, and he wants to make the next generation stronger, especially commoners, right? So he basically asks Asta, like, what kind of spell do you want? And Asta would be like, he doesn't want to be pushy towards the Wizard King, so he's like, oh, any spell would do, fine. And the Wizard King's like, okay, let me think. This spell looks pretty easy to use. So he gives him, he shows him the page, and Asta would be like, copy magic ink note taker, and this is when he would copy down one of his spells, and this spell would be a binding spell called chronostasis, which is basically the kind of binding spell that the Wizard King uses throughout the series. Basically, it's like a orb that goes around the person, and it has like Roman numerals rotating, going around like an axis or something. So after that would be done, this is when the Wizard King would ask them if they want to join for the ceremony for the promotions, and they would basically accept it since they have no real reason not to. And I'm just gonna skip the ceremony since Asta doesn't do anything there. So we get to the banquet, and this is the part where Asta's kind of like shoving down food, right? Because he's really hungry and he's never had food like this before. So as he's doing this, this is when some of the nobles would comment, basically some of the comments basically saying that he's basically like a rat, because of how he's eating and how much he's eating. So they compare him to a rat in the kingdom. So as they're saying this, Asta kind of be like, wow, that's pretty harsh, not really caring too much since he's kind of used to this treatment. And then the other members of his group would be kind of surprised that he's not really taking it to heart. So this is when Leopold kind of speaks up and says, talks about like to the Golden Dawn members, like, didn't you recently recruit a commoner? If I was there at the dungeon, it would have went way smoother. And this is when the Sand Mage would kind of comment back and say, well, even though he's Golden Dawn, he's a commoner, so it's not like we expect too much of him. And would get kind of mad at this. And Klaus would basically speak up and say that that's not true. They did a fine job. Or I guess it would be Mimosa first that would speak up. And then this is when the Golden Dawn member would basically say, like, didn't you get injured and take yourself out of the fight? That's a disgrace. And this is when Klaus would be like, that's not true. She performed she performed well. And this is when the mage would tell Klaus, like, don't you feel like disgraceful or shameful for even associating with these people? And Klaus wouldn't have anything to say back. So this is when Solid would be like, come on, we all know who's the weakest link here. And this is when he would go up to Noelle and kind of pour his water onto her. And the only thing that she could really say is why. And as she's about to leave, this was when Asta kind of grabs her arm and he stands up on top of the table. Or before that, he says, Noelle, you shouldn't have to leave because of scum like him. And this is when he goes on the table and basically exclaims that commoner, like royalty, nobles, why does that matter? It doesn't, I've been hearing this all my life. I'm not like you guys, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm still going to be the future Wizard King. After hearing this, most of the nobles and royalty there start laughing. But the sand mage that's there isn't. He says, I'll put you in my place. I'll put you in your place, right? And this is when he tries to he uses his sand magic to kind of throw projectiles at him. But I think at this point, Asta would use his kind of wind sword that he would learn from the person who taught him swordmanship. If you don't, I forgot his name, but he's basically the red-headed teacher from the Diamond Kingdom. So yeah, he would just use that to kind of cut through the sand, since he does still have a lot of magical power, to rival So that didn't work at first. So it would be it next would be Solid. If his attempt to try to hit Asta, right, he would use his water serpent. So what Asta would do is that he would use his mineral magic that he got from Mars to kind of block it. So after that was done and he would successfully block the attack, he'd be like, is that all you guys have? And basically this is when the sand mage would use that kind of sand guard that he uses in the anime to kind of hold Asta. So what they're basically saying that's gonna be enough out of you. And this is when Solid basically says, a commoner like him trying to stand up to royalty, he needs to be punished more. And this is when he tries to use one of his more stronger attacks, which is I believe it's called Water Bullet, and he's charging this up, right? And this is the perfect time for Asta to use the new spell that he got from the Wizard King. So as he basically frees his arm out of the kind of sand, just how he does in the anime, because of his sheer physical strength, right? So he would do that, and then as he got his arm out, he would use his grimoire, and he would basically say, copy magic ink, chronostasis. And this is when he would basically the attack that was about to go towards Asta would be surrounded by this kind of ball, or this orb going around it with Roman numerals rotating around it. So if you didn't know, this kind of binding magic works not only on projectiles, but also on people, not just, you know what I mean, right? It's not just people that get bind to this magic. And as the nobles are seeing this, right, they start questioning everything, right? Because not only does he have wind magic, but he also has mineral magic, and then he has time magic. So they're like, you're just a cheap imitation. Why do you have one of the Wizard King's spells? What did you do? How did you get your grimy hands on that? And this is when Asta would tell him that the Wizard King himself gave him that spell. And they'd be like, it's obvious lies. And this is when the Silver Eagle's captain would come through, Nozel, and he would basically tell Solid that he's wasting his time and his magic on this commoner, and that he'll take care of it, right? And as this is going down, this is when Leopold basically says, oh, Mimosa, you're right. This Asta guy is just how you described him. And he would basically declare Asta as his rival. And this would get Nozel even more disgusted in Asta, right? And he would basically say, a commoner being the rival to a royal? I never thought I would see the day. Looks like the Crimson Lions have gone through somewhat of a rough patch. And this is when Fogolion would kind of step up and kind of say, kind of have that kind of rivalry between Nozel and him, right, where they both emit both of their manas and kind of make all the eyes focus on them. Before they could really fight, this is when they get an announcement, or they hear some stuff going outside, and they find out that there's like an attack on the actual city. So the stone mage would basically use his grimoire to use this like spell that kind of shows like a model of the city, and he would see what was happening. So Fogolion would take the leader position and basically split up everyone into groups, but Asta, saying like he thinks that people are wasting time, he basically says like, what are you guys doing? There's people dying. I'm gonna go out there and save as many people as I can. And as he's doing this and he runs off, Leopold, I believe, would follow him, just how he does in the anime. So what Asta would do at this point is that he would make mineral clones of himself, just how like Mars was able to do, and he would use that in combination with the wind swords, that he would just make a bunch of them and give them to his kind of clones, and he would just go out where all these zombies are coming through, and eventually after a while he would find Rades, and Rades would be kind of not torturing, but about to end this like little girl's life. So Asta would kind of save her, and this is when Rades says like, you think you could stop my army of the dead? And this is when Asta's like, yeah, I got my own army. And this is when he would show the kind of mineral versions of Asta. And Rades would kind of be angry due to the fact that he's able to have his own army, right? And he would kind of do that same like backstory about how he was like kicked out of the purple orcas and stuff like that. So yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, but if you guys have any ideas for like some spirit ink magic, then you guys can just tell me some comments down below, right? So basically at this point, Rades would take out his number 4, which would be Jimmy. Yeah, I believe it's Jimmy. So it's the same thing that he would do in the anime, where he has those cursed bullets. But I don't think in this one Asta would really have too much difficulty with this one, because I don't think he'll get hit because due to the fact that he has these clones to kind of protect him. And yeah, I don't think the cursed shots do too much damage anyways, and that's kind of like a fact, right? He even explains, I think Rades even explains this. So if you're hitting something like really hard, like some minerals, right? And these minerals don't bleed, so it basically be like a wall that Asta could use to protect him and the girl. So what Asta would do is that he would use his kind of chain magic to kind of slice through Jimmy, and because Jimmy isn't really like, their zombies' bodies aren't really that strong, and he isn't like, doesn't have really much protection magic, and he isn't that mobile, I think he'd be able to slice him up pretty easily using that same spell that the chain mage used on Asta in canon to kind of hurt him that way, right? So Jimmy would kind of be out. And number 3 would be Dave, but he doesn't use Dave on Asta. He would use Dave with Noel and what's his name, Leopold, right, to kind of have them not join in the fight. So Asta would have to fight Albert. And what Albert does is that he's kind of like this floating amputee that shoots kind of like, I believe it was electricity. And as this is all happening, Noelle would come through, and she would look at Asta having kind of like a hard time with this enemy, since it's in the air, and she couldn't really do much. So she says, she kind of screams out for like help, Asta needs help. And this is when Fogolion would come and basically hit her on the head, saying, to snap out of it, because she's still remembering how, her siblings treated her. So he's basically saying, he says the same line that he does in the anime. You know, being weak is okay, but staying weak isn't, right? So that's basically the kind of motivation that he gives her. And when a projectile was about to hit the girl, this is when Noelle uses her magic to kind of defend, right? So what Asta does at this point is that he would use a combination of, I think, if I remember, he has one of Magnus like spells. If he doesn't, we could just say that he got it, right? So what Asta would do is that he would charge up a prison death scatter shot, right? Or I guess it wouldn't be called prison, or I don't know. I think it would be not that one, but the one that he uses at the baptism. I forgot what it's called. I think it's called like a firebolt, I think, or a charge explosion. I forgot what it's called exactly, but it was like a really powerful fire spell, right? So I think he would use this against Jimmy, or not Jimmy, Alfred, or Albert, I think it's called, Albert. So it'd be really effective since it's fire and he's a corpse. So he'd basically be one-shotted. So this would put him in a position where Fogolion didn't really need to help him. So this is when he brings out his number one, which I think is called Carl, if I remember. So Carl would do the same thing as he does in the anime. He would put up that wall, or that kind of bubble shield, and then after a while of not being able to go through the shield, this is when he would start attacking. So Asta would just put up a wall of crystal or minerals to kind of block the shots. And this is when Fogolion comes through, and you know, obviously Rades would see this, so he would kind of split the fire between Asta and Fogolion, and Fogolion would use his kind of magic, his fire magic, to do that kind of pillar kind of defense that he does in the anime, right? To kind of block the shots. And what he tells Asta is to basically to, you know, be aware of your surroundings and kind of look at the situation in a calm point of view and see if you're able to actually win a fight. And if that's basically what he's trying to explain to him. So as Fogolion's doing more kind of analyzing the situation, he finds a weak spot in the shield, shoots it, it basically burns up Carl, and they capture Rades, and they look at his grimoire. They're surprised that it's only one page, and this is when Rades gets a message from Valtos to kind of get out of there, right? That he had his chance, but now they gotta leave. So obviously this is when he would protest about it, kind of mumbling to himself, but there's not really much he could do. And this is when Valtos kind of takes all the magic knights in the area, except for kind of in that general area where Asta's at, to a different, or not to a different, to like miles or kilometers away from the kingdom, right? And that fight against Yuno and the Ash mage or witch still goes the same way, where he unlocks his kind of spirits, or his spirit, and yeah, so that doesn't really change too much. So I guess it'd be the same way, the same kind of scenario where Rades needs help to kind of get out of there, and he would need the help of that kind of group that comes through near the end. The kind of like 5 mages that come through, the one that has the root magic, one that has the slime, the salamander magic and stuff like that, right? So they would come to his aid, and he would kind of protest this since he wants to stay there and kind of fight. But knowing that he has no chance of winning, he kind of accepts this, right? So at this point, Asta would be kind of tired physically and with his magic, since he's been using so many different types, and he also had that fight with the nobles and royalty. So this is after a while of fighting, the kind of nobles and royals would come back in their kind of combination magic that they all contributed to, and they would get there pretty fast. So the Midnight Sun, thinking that there's no way out of this, they gotta run. And Nozel was basically, or before this happens, I forgot to mention that Fogolion would still be teleported to Licht, right? Because he, in the anime, he accepted and went and he got, that sneak attack, right? So he would still be on the floor, kind of nearly dying. And I don't think, Asta doesn't have any real healing magic, so he has no way to kind of heal him. So they would still be in the same way as the anime, where they would try to stop the bleeding at all costs. And this is when Nozel would see this, and he would get very angry, and he would use his magic to kind of fight the Midnight Sun. He would use his Rain of Silver, and before he could actually do anything, the girl with the sticky salamander would use her dark magic item on it to kind of boost its absorption, right? So the mercury would just be absorbed into the sticky salamander. And in this process, in the fighting, I think they would still capture Asta. So as he's getting captured and they leave, this is when Solid would comment on like, what's the point of a magic knight if he can't win? And he's referring to Fogolion and how he lost, right? And this is what gets Nozel mad, right? He gets kind of pissed, and he's like, we are less than him because he was here to fight. And he basically says, go patrol the area, I don't want to hear your juvenile like thoughts, right? And obviously Solid would back down and gladly accept his orders, right? So by the time they got back to their base and they're walking through the kind of cave area, this is when what's it called, the Wizard King's actually there to surprise them. And he says that he kind of like charges 2 orbs, right? And he goes between 2 mages of the Midnight Sun and just kind of projects the orbs towards both of their directions, and they kind of get erased. And he's like, sorry, I don't know if I could go against all these kind of mages. So he basically tells them, like, if you surrender, he won't kill him. Or the first person to surrender, he won't kill. Or something like that, right? And none of them accept it. So he does the same thing that he does in the anime. He blitz all their attacks, goes behind him, uses chronostasis to kind of trap all of them, and Asta gets freed. And he basically has the same conversation that he does in the anime about, or he has that same thought process about not trying to look weak in front of the Wizard King, kind of standing up on his own. And this is when a bright light comes through, and the Wizard King tells Asta to ready up. And they kind of have that kind of fight scene in like a mere instant, just how they do in the anime. And by the time it's over, all the members of the Midnight Sun, except for one mage, disappears. And the Wizard King actually remarks on this, telling Asta that the fight was super fast, and whoever that was incredibly fast. But we were able to capture this one wizard, right? And they would go back to the kind of capital, and Asta would explain what happened to Fogolion and things like that, right? So I think I'll end it here. We're almost at 1,000, right? We need like less than 100 at this point. So if you guys, I'm doing something special for my 1,000 subscribers. The sooner we get there, the sooner I could do it. So with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. So yeah,